I'm Owen Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. Okay, I want to give you guys one of my frontline stories here that I know very few people in Vancouver real estate can really provide you, and I think that's why what makes my blog quite a bit different than a lot of the ones you see out there. And I think there's a lesson to be learned here, especially for some of my younger viewers here. I'm going to give you a story here. Now, as you guys know, I own quite a bit of investment real estate. I have for over 30 years. I just systematically have bought properties, continue to save my money, and then bought another one and hung on to it and keep tenants in there. So I'm going to give you a story here about one of my units in Richmond. This is one of my first investment units. I bought this unit over 30 years ago, and it's been long paid off. I don't even have a mortgage on this thing. This is an older wood frame building, almost 40 years old now, although I did a reno to it about 5 years ago, completely renoed the unit. It's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. Very basic unit, but in central Richmond, very close to SkyTrain Station and Lansdowne Mall in central Richmond. So I've had a tenant in this unit. I get very little tenancy turnover in this building. I've got several units in here. I've got one tenant in this building as well that's been in there over 5 years. But my current tenant that I had in there, who's been in there just over 3 years, called me 6 weeks ago and said, I'm moving in with my girlfriend. We're going to move out to New Westminster, and we're going to rent a larger apartment out there. He's working out in New West, so no problem. So to give you a background here, he's been in there just over 3 years. He was paying $1,050 a month. And just for reference here, when he rented this in July of 2015, if you remember, the market kind of really took off that fall of 2015. So he got in at a pretty good time. 6 months later, I probably could have gotten about $1,150 for this unit, but he was paying $1,050, been there for 3 years. So I put the listing on Craigslist, posted the photos, and as always, especially in this price range, in this location, I was inundated with applicants. I had, I believe, something around 15 to 20 emails within the first 5 hours of posting it on Craigslist. And anyone who is a renter right now and has been looking for units or renting units over the years can attest to this. It is crazy out there. You are bidding and competing on condos to rent right now. It's a landlord's dreamland. And anyone that tells you that rent is cheap or renting versus buying has never rented in the Lower Mainland. But anyways, I immediately had, I think I booked about 6 showings over the course of 2 hours. It's very easy now to get a tenant. It's not like you have to show it very much. Essentially what you do is you give the prospective tenants your time frame. So I had set up a time with my existing tenant for Friday afternoon. He gave me a couple of hours. I was able to show the unit to about 6 parties over the course of about an hour and a half on a Friday afternoon. And as expected, of the 6 parties that looked at it, 4 gave me applications, good quality tenants. Make a long story short, I've now got it rented at $1,450. That is my new rent. So that is approximately a 40% increase from 3 years ago. Pretty heavy rent increase. And in some ways, I think maybe I priced the thing a little too low. I probably could have pushed this thing up around $1,500 a month, I think. But $1,450 is what I'm getting. Very nice raise for me. No lack of high quality tenants, or at least tenants that were willing to pay that money, had a decent job, and had a good credit history as well, because that's important. I run a credit check and make sure they're credit worthy. But the message I want to send here, a few things I'm noticing here. First off, I've owned this property for over 30 years and had tenants in there. A few things I'm noticing. First off, the type of tenants I'm getting in this unit, I'm finding are getting a little bit older. And, you know, it's a trend that I'm starting to see on a number of my units. And it's not a good trend, really. I mean, it's fine with me. I don't care how old the tenant is. But it shows that what's happening is once you get on that hamster wheel of renting, it is extremely difficult to get off it. And again, to my younger viewers, why buying your principal residence should be at the top of your priority list. You should be almost losing sleep over this if you're a young person working. You should be trying to do everything you can to jump those first 2 hurdles, getting the down payment and getting pre-approved for a mortgage. Once you cross those 2, you have set yourself up or at least given yourself a huge advantage now financially moving forward. But if you can't do that in your 20s or your 30s and or even your mid 30s, it's going to be very difficult for you. As I say, it's like a hamster on a wheel. You can't get off that wheel. Once you're paying $1,400 or $1,500 a month, and remember, these are on the lower end rent. I've got properties in Vancouver, 1-bedrooms, and I'm renting for $2,300 a month for 600 square feet. Totally different demographic there. My tenants in Richmond tend to be a little bit more working class, blue collar, tradesmen, that kind of thing. My tenants downtown tend to be professionals, younger lawyers, doctors, most of which are kind of in the process of saving for their down payment, but in the interim are going to rent for a couple of years. These lower price units that I have tend to be longer term tenants. They stay, which is great for me, but not so great for the tenant. Because once you get on that wheel and you get into your late 30s or 40s, you're losing a lot of time here. And the message I want to send here to people, as a landlord, I'm telling you this, you do not want to be a long-term renter living in the Lower Mainland. You don't. Renting should be a stopgap, a short-term situation while you get your money together. And to be honest, it can be done because many of my young tenants over the years that I've had in my units, I've ended up selling them a condo. If they want my help, I'm more than happy to give it to them. If they start asking me about real estate and what's it going to take, I'm happy to take them under my wing, give them some advice on how they can start getting into the market. I'll give them a copy of my book now. But I can't stress this more for people, how dangerous it is to get onto that hamster wheel of long-term renting. Every year that's ticking down is another year lost. And as everyone knows, it's time and compounding and getting started early that makes retirement and retiring early and financial security so much easier. The longer you wait, the tougher it is. My advice to young people here, without rambling on too much here, if you're a young person in your 20s, you just finished school here, I'd recommend two things to you. You all want to live in Vancouver because it's the greatest city in Canada by far. And who doesn't want to live in this? This is the best, but it's also extremely expensive. So in some cases, if you're not able to get enough money together from your current job and your rent is taking 30 or 40 or 50 or 60% of your net pay, then you've got to make changes here. You've got to do one of a couple of things. You've got to drastically reduce your rent costs. So that might mean renting a detached house with 4 or 5 other people and taking your rent from $1,500 or $1,600 or $1,800 a month down to $600 a month. It's not going to be fun. It's going to be like a fraternity probably, a frat house. But at least you would drastically cut down on your monthly outlay for housing. The second thing I would recommend to people, there's no harm in moving out of the Lower Mainland for 5 years or 6 years or whatever to a place that is much less expensive, where your income is just as good or if not better. Bank everything you can and then move back to the Lower Mainland once you're able to buy a property as opposed to having to rent it and stay on that hamster wheel. So take it from me, I see this stuff every year in my business. And, I feel for these long-term tenants. It's just, you're not going to get ahead if you're pumping half or more of your net pay to renting a property. It leaves very little left after you deduct your food and your car and transportation and your MSP premiums and your insurance. What do you have left now to save for your RRSP or your TFSA? You don't. So you're kind of losing ground every year. It's tough. And listen, it's not easy, but it can be done. But again, I would do one of two things for my young viewers. Move to a place temporarily where you can bank more money and cut down on your housing costs. Or, as I said, share a house with 6 or 7 people. It's going to be tough. Not going to have a lot of privacy, but it's kind of what needs to be done. And then, of course, I've got so many young clients. I mean, it's the great thing about my job. I meet so many people from different walks of life. I've got people buying $300,000 condos, and I've got people buying $3 million homes from me. That's what makes my job interesting. But so many of the young people I'm working with today are working multiple jobs. I've talked about it before. They've drastically cut their expenses down to the bone. They're going to rough it for 2 or 3 years. They're going to work a couple of side hustles. It's just getting over those first 2 hurdles. Getting that 30 or 40 or 50K you need to buy a New West or a small Richmond condo. You can still buy decent wood frame condos on SkyTrain in Richmond for $350K. So you might need $50,000 down, and you're going to have working income to qualify for the mortgage. But once you're in, man, you have cleared a huge, huge financial hurdle. And if you can do that in your 20s or 30s, you're off to the races. But if you have to wait until you're in your late 30s or 40s, it can still be done, but it is going to be very difficult for you. And it's why I hear these stories about people in Canada living paycheck to paycheck. If they had an emergency of $1,000 or more, they wouldn't be able to come up with the money, which I just find mind-boggling and scary. You need to get out of that hamster wheel of paycheck to paycheck. I'm Owen Bigland. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.